What is going on with the Snow White movie? Like a lot of people, I grew up watching and loving Disney movies. I had the compilation albums, I dressed up as the characters for Halloween, I ate off of special Disney plates, and I had plushies of all my favorite animal sidekicks. But in recent years, I hesitate to even call myself a fan, because I've been left disappointed far too many times to count. Since the company's inception in 1923, Disney has had its fair share of ups and downs creatively, but if you ask me, they're currently in one of their worst slumps to date. I credit this to their over-reliance on their pre-existing IP, with the vast majority of their recent releases consisting of unimaginative remakes and sequels. While a few of these projects have tanked, others have been massive successes, and with Disney continuously prioritizing its shareholders over its audience, it looks like they're going to be continuing down this derivative path for the foreseeable future. One of their upcoming projects is 2025's Snow White, a live-action remake of the animated 1937 film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and based on what I've seen so far, I don't have very high hopes for it. Today I'm going to be sharing my initial thoughts on Disney's Snow White and discuss where I think they went wrong, including the girl boss storyline, bizarre animation, controversial casting, and lackluster costume design. Let's get into it. Since 2010, Disney has released over a dozen live-action remakes, including Alice in Wonderland, Maleficent, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, Aladdin, The Lion King, Lady and the Tramp, Mulan, Cruella, Peter Pan and Wendy, Pinocchio, and The Little Mermaid. And some of these, like Maleficent and The Lion King, have even gone on to have sequels. You might have noticed that all of these live-action remakes are based off of Disney movies that were traditionally animated, and the reason for that is more simple than you'd think. Disney's entire brand relies on awareness, and by releasing movies based on their pre-existing IP, they're not only able to profit off of their fans' nostalgia, but also rope in some new viewers as well. This reintroduction is especially important when it comes to children, as the vast majority aren't going to take the time to watch a movie that's 10 times older than they are. Just think about it, your favorite Disney character is probably one that you saw in theaters as a kid. Unlike Moana or Frozen, whose sequels Disney can easily add to the growing number of computer-animated projects on their roster, it's literally impossible for them to make continuations of their older films ever since the hand-drawn division was shut down in 2013. Disney's decision to switch from traditional to computer animation is rooted in the studio's 2000 slump, which saw the release of box office disappointments like Home on the Range, Fantasia 2000, and Treasure Planet. At the same time, Pixar, who had embraced computer animation, was thriving, and quickly became one of Disney's biggest competitors. After seeing other companies' success, Disney decided to dip its toes into computer animation with projects like Chicken Little, Bolt, and Meet the Robinsons, but they were received about as well as their hand-drawn films from the time period, so they continued switching back and forth between the two styles. In 2009, they released The Princess and the Frog, and although it was praised as a return to form for the company, it didn't meet Disney's expectations financially. The following year, they released Tangled, which combined their tried-and-true fairy tale formula with modern computer animation, and the film was a smash hit. When Frozen came out in 2013 and broke box office records, that was the final nail in the coffin for hand-drawn animation, and CEO Bob Iger announced that the division would be closing permanently. At the time, the reason for switching to computer animation was cited as being cost-effective, which I'm not so sure is true, considering The Princess and the Frog cost less to make than Up did the same year. Sure, one made a lot more money, but I don't think that had anything to do with it being computer animated versus hand-drawn. Now, with the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs film being traditionally animated, Disney obviously couldn't give it a computer-animated sequel. Just think about how people reacted when the art style changed halfway through American Dragon Jake Long. So, they were left with no choice but to go down the live-action remake route. But if you know anything about the Walt Disney Company, then you know what a slap in the face that decision is. What's important to understand about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was that it was Walt Disney's passion project, and despite all of Hollywood warning him against it, he stuck to his guns and made it anyway, putting his entire business on the line in the process. Thankfully, Snow White became one of the biggest movies of the 1930s, completely changing the animation industry and legitimizing Disney in the eyes of the public. Because of the film's popularity, Walt briefly considered making an animated short that would serve as a loose continuation of the Snow White story, but he wound up scrapping the project, no doubt because of his well-recorded disdain for sequels. Quote, "I'm a born experimenter. To this day, I don't believe in sequels. I can't follow popular cycles. I have to move on to new things. There are many new worlds to conquer." Can someone remind Bob Iger of that? During his lifetime, Walt never stopped trying to innovate, even when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he'd be positively shocked at the way things are operating now. Considering how profitable the Walt Disney Company is as a whole, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be taking risks when it comes to filmmaking. They literally have a $200 billion parachute, but instead, they're just coasting on their name recognition. Disregarding the fact that a live-action Snow White film just feels cheap, the animation itself is an eyesore, which is pretty ironic considering Disney was first and foremost an animation studio. Meanwhile, other studios are turning out projects like Klaus, Wolfwalkers, Nimona, Blue Eye Samurai, Arcane, Across the Spider-Verse, and The Wild Robot. And what is going on with the weird orange filter on everything? Since the company's inception, everything about their female characters, from their appearance to their personality to their role in the story, has been a reflection of the time period they were created. Although she's often criticized by modern viewers for being boring and weak, Snow White was an inspiration to women who had lived through the Great Depression. With the rise of girl boss feminism in the 2010s, Disney was routinely chastised for its depiction of female characters, with people saying they were too reliant on men and lacked true strength. I never agreed, but enough of these BuzzFeed articles and Tumblr posts went viral that Disney decided to make some changes. But if you ask me, they overcorrected. In their animated projects, they removed romantic storylines and made the female characters the same brand of quirky, while in live-action remakes, shallow changes were made to make them appear more tough and independent. Mulan now has magic powers that only men have. Belle's father is an even bigger buffoon, and she's the inventor instead. And Jasmine wants to rule Agrabah by herself. With the Seven Dwarfs being dropped from the title, it's pretty clear that the Snow White remake is going to be headed in a similar girl boss direction, something that's also been reiterated by the cast. They've said time and time again that their version of Snow White isn't going to have a big love story, which I personally think is a mistake. Now, I understand people's complaints about the original prince. After all, he barely has any screen time before he and Snow White have their happily ever after. But that's only because Disney felt like they couldn't pull off the storyline they had actually planned for him, which involved being kidnapped by the evil queen and saved by Snow White's animal friends. Instead of removing the romantic subplot from the remake, why not flesh out the prince's storyline to make his and Snow White's relationship more believable? Why does Disney keep acting like being in love makes a woman weak? I also think it's funny that they're acting like a Snow White who wants to save her kingdom is such a newfangled idea, when back in 2012, both Mirror Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman already did that. Like, sorry Disney, you're too late. Over the years, different adaptations of Snow White have drawn criticism for its depiction of little people, and when Disney initially announced their plans to remake the film, I genuinely wondered how they were going to handle that issue. Turns out, they had absolutely no idea. In January 2022, a few months after the film was confirmed to be in development, actor Peter Dinklage commented, quote, "They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that fucking backward story about seven dwarves living in a cave together." Dinklage, who is a form of dwarfism, has spoken about how difficult it was to get started in the industry, often being relegated to roles about silly supernatural creatures. He's obviously broken out of that, but not many other actors with dwarfism have. Dinklage's comments were received poorly by others in the community, who said that many aspiring actors would benefit from being in a major motion picture. Shortly after Dinklage's comments, Disney made an announcement, quote, "To avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community." But in July 2023, photos from the set were leaked and featured what appeared to be the film's new take on the 7 dwarves, which included a diverse range of sizes, races, and genders. This decision was decried as being too woke, and although Disney initially attempted to deny the photos, they later confirmed they were indeed from the set. A few months later, Disney announced that they would be moving the release date of Snow White back an entire year for reshoots, delaying it to 2025. It soon became clear that one of the reasons for these reshoots was the dwarves, who were reverted back to their miniature size and given grotesque animated appearances intended to resemble the original characters. One thing that a lot of people forget when discussing Snow White is that the dwarves in the original Brothers Grimm tale were based on the ancient supernatural creatures who appeared in Germanic folklore. And although often described as short, it wasn't a prerequisite. And the only reason we make the association today is because of films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I don't know if it's been a while since some of you have seen the 1937 film, but did you know that Snow White never actually refers to the dwarves as dwarves? She calls them the little men, which is also how they were referred to by the screenwriters. Only the evil queen ever calls them dwarves. From the moment Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, she's been on the receiving end of a hate campaign that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. She's not white enough, not pretty enough, not nice enough. Look, I'm not excited about this movie either, but I'm not going to punish the actress for it when there's dozens of money-hungry executives who should be taking the blame instead. Now, I'm not saying that Disney has the purest intentions when they go forward with this sort of colorblind casting, and I honestly think it's pretty shitty of them to routinely fail to protect the up-and-coming actors who have to deal with their racist fanbase. We've seen it happen with The Little Mermaid, Star Wars, Percy Jackson, and now Snow White. This sort of backlash is reflective of the conservative direction the United States is heading in general, hence the recent election. But it's interesting how all of these things that people are crying about being too woke weren't even that scandalous 20 years ago. Case in point, 2001 Snow White, the Fairest of Them All, 1997 Cinderella, and the Merlin TV series, which all had non-white cast members, and surprise, surprise, the world didn't end. Taking notes from the original fairy tale, Snow White is described as having lips red as the rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow. I'm assuming they're going to take that line out of the remake, but regardless, I think Disney could have made Zegler resemble the character just a tiny bit more to give her a fighting chance against the trolls. Obviously, she isn't as pale as the animated Snow White, practically no one is, but I don't think her skin color is where the problem lies, it's the rest of her styling. I wouldn't expect nor want them to make her paler, but they could have mimicked the effect. For one, she needed a proper red lip. I know the reasoning for the barely there makeup look is to make her appear younger, but I feel like some rosy cheeks and freckles combined with the red lip would have still been youthful. The hair was also a mistake. First, it needed to be jet black, not only because that reads as more Snow White, but also because it would have created a bigger contrast to her skin. Secondly, the bob is just terrible. I get that Disney needs to sell merchandise, so they have to make the live-action version resemble her animated counterpart as much as possible. But the bob that they gave her is so short with no volume that it just doesn't look very flattering. And I've seen it compared to Lord Farquaad, Dora the Explorer, Charles Dickens, and Willy Wonka. If they weren't going to commit to the 1930s style curls that inspired Snow White's hair in the original film, I feel like they could have faked the shape with a snood, which might have helped her outfit look a bit more luxe and historical as well. Plus, with a snood, her hair could actually be long, so you could have her have a different look once she's run away from the queen. Now, Snow White's color palette isn't as easy to play around with as some of the other princesses, but I feel like they leaned into all of the worst parts of her outfit in the live action. I actually don't mind the bodice, even if the collar's shape is a bit too stiff for my tastes, but that damn fluorescent tulle skirt gives me a migraine every time I see it. I'm guessing it was meant to make her appear more playful and fun, just like her red ballerina shoes, but it just looks cheap and childish. Also, I really don't want people to try and pin this on Rachel Zegler, because there are multiple times where she's looked like a real-life princess. Disney just did her dirty. Everyone has been so focused on the casting of Snow White, but I feel like there's no mention of the real weak link of the cast, Gal Gadot. Other Disney live-action remakes have literally had Oscar-nominated actresses as their antagonists in the past. Angelina Jolie as Maleficent, Cate Blanchett as Lady Tremaine, Emma Stone and Glenn Close as Cruella, and Helena Bonham Carter as the Red Queen. Meanwhile, Gal Gadot's claim to fame is a few appearances in Fast and Furious and Wonder Woman.
I need you to give me the stone!
Even if you just compare the other evil queens we've seen put to screen, like Charlize Theron, Julia Roberts, Miranda Richardson, and Sigourney Weaver, her portrayal looks flat and uninteresting. Her voice doesn't even have as much charisma as the original. Once again, I understand that they're trying to keep the evil queen's appearance consistent with the original movie, because merchandise. But it doesn't translate. The hood is far too tight, making her look like she got her head stuck in a ski mask. And with all of the iridescent fabrics and giant gemstones, it kinda looks like something you'd get at the last minute from Spirit Halloween. Instead, I wish they'd given her a draped wimple. It'd be a lot more regal while having more versatility. Plus, the medieval influence would kind of offset all the modern details in her wardrobe. The film's costume designer is Sandy Powell, who has done some amazing work in the past like Cinderella, Shakespeare in Love, and The Young Victoria. So I'm not pinning the blame on her for this. I just think that like many aspects of the film, Disney executives did too much meddling and hindered the creative process. Now, it's kind of a requirement for Disney villains to have a bold look since it creates a stark contrast between them and the sweet and innocent heroine. But in the case of the evil queen, they should have toned things down a bit when making the transition to live action. Again, it's meant to be a recreation of her animated look, but it feels out of place considering the film's tone. For example, Helena Bonham Carter's Red Queen is honestly even more cartoonish than her animated counterpart, but everything about that film is colorful and bold, so it works. Whereas for Angelina Jolie's Maleficent, they did away with the green skin and purple eyeshadow in order to make her look more human, allowing audiences to empathize with her more easily. Anytime I make a video criticizing Disney, I get hit with the "it's for kids" comments, and I need people to realize that that line of thinking is part of the problem. Disney used to make family films, meaning they were intended for the whole family. It wasn't just about making money. They were trying to make movie magic and tell a story that had heart that people could relate to for years to come. Besides, even if these movies were just for kids, do kids not deserve better? Because I'm so grateful that I got to grow up during a time when Disney wasn't just shoveling slop in a bucket and telling me to eat up. It's important to hold Disney accountable for its mediocrity, because if we don't, that's all we're going to get. Instead of all these live-action remakes, I'm begging Disney to return to original concepts, ones that they keep businessmen far away from, because I'm still thinking about the version of Wish that we could have gotten. I'll end this video with a quote from Walt Disney himself. Perhaps there will be other ventures with equal critical and financial success, but we know we can't hit a home run with the bases loaded every time we go into play. We also know the only way we can even get to first base is by constantly going back and continuing to swing. What are your thoughts on the Snow White live action movie? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!